Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Joining us on the program is Andrew Giuliani, former special assistant to former President Donald Trump and former candidate for governor of New York, to talk a little bit more about the current state of play. Well, Mr. Giuliani, thank you so much for joining us. Right off the bat, let's talk about the vice presidential selection. What does JD Vance bring to the ticket, in your view?
I think it's a look right at the Rust Belt. I mean, obviously, the junior senator from Ohio, carried Ohio, was able to win that state. But as we know, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, all three states that President Trump won in 2016 went Biden's way in 2020. And there are three swing states that are going to be very, very important to determining who wins the presidency on November 5th. You have to think that JD Vance speaks directly to most of the residents of those three states, including his home state of Ohio, which should be in the red column, but has been a swing state as recently as 2012. So when you look at the math of the electoral map, I think that's exactly what the Trump team was doing when they selected JD Vance.
So it's a good blue-collar pick. What about his age? Does JD Vance's age lift former President Trump's chances?
Yeah, it may. I mean, look, there's been so much talk, probably more about Biden, but also about President Trump as well, with them being 81 and 78 years old, respectfully. I think you get some youth on this ticket, and it changes it a little bit in terms of what does that conversation like. Now, I know you'll have other people that'll say, well, look, this is somebody who's only served a year and a half in the Senate here, somebody who's young, maybe a little bit inexperienced in some kind of way, but he's also somebody that is connected with the American people, the American masses, through his book, through his Senate run, in a way that I think most politicians have not on a national level. And having talked to President Trump just as recently as yesterday, I know that's something that he was really, really looking at as he was trying to make his final selection here for who was going to join him on the presidential ticket.
After the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, we've seen calls from many quarters throughout the country towards seeking more unity in the country, coming together as one America. Do you see these two, President Trump and former President Trump and JD Vance, as calling for more unity here, or kind of going back to sort of tear the house down type of ideology?
Well, look, I want unity, but I also think answers are very important. And I don't want unity to lead to ignorance, if you will, in terms of the answers that Mayorkas was talking about. I want to make sure that I know exactly what happened in these security lapses. To have a shooter 125 meters away when the longest shots ever made have been 30 times that length. That's something that I sat through hundreds of White House security briefings, looking at high points that were outside of security perimeters to make sure that the president was safe, even if it was outside of the Secret Service security perimeter. So I think we need answers to exactly what ended up happening on that day. And frankly, I also think this needs to go both ways. Joe Biden needs to have a better answer for why he said just a few short days ago, Donald Trump needs to be in the bullseye. I don't think his answer to Lester Holt today was adequate.
Even the way the former president was moved to the van after the shooter was down, that presupposes there was only one shooter. And you wonder, we have lots of columns getting written like the motive of the shooter is irrelevant. Francis Wilkinson, for instance, writes in our own pages here at Bloomberg. But it does sort of raise the question as to who else might have been involved. Do we have any sense of that? And do you fear that?
Right now, we don't, and I think that's the problem. I think we need answers as soon as possible on this. We can't allow theories to win the day, right? You want facts to be able to look at this stuff because, frankly, this is going to be President Trump is going to be going out and doing rallies maybe as soon as this weekend. And you think about it, same thing for Biden as well and RFK Jr. These candidates, they deserve to be protected. If we believe in the First Amendment in this country, then the public square needs to be safe, whether it's red, whether it's blue, whatever it is there. So,
let's hope.
Right now, it's just theories.
Let's hope this was a one-off and that they will be safe.
Yes.
I'm curious about whether or not, you think that it will be different this time in terms of of former President Trump's aides, because one of the things that we noticed, obviously, in the prior administration was that so many of his aides eventually left either of their own volition or they were booted out by former President Trump. Will JD Vance be any different?
I think so. I mean, I think this is a guy who obviously, as of 8 years ago, he was not the biggest fan of Trump. And I'm sure you guys have run through some of the stuff that he has said. But he's a guy who was really won over, I think, to the Trump world by the policies, by the policy successes. Maybe he didn't fall in love necessarily with the Twitter feed and the current X feed and Truth feed at the time, but was won over by the policies. I think that shows me somebody who was able to keep an open mind, even though he came in as a so-called never Trumper, and realized that this president, while he may have a unique style, he's able to accomplish things that that maybe a typical politician is not able to accomplish. And I think you could just look at the successes of the 45th president and compare it to the 46th president. Let's talk about foreign policy. You talk about the two foreign wars that have started under Joe Biden. With Trump, you saw peace through strength. You could talk about the economy as well. You cover that very, very well every single day. I think the successes of the Trump administration from a deregulatory standpoint was extremely successful. And you look at the Biden administration, we've seen inflation continue to creep up. I know those numbers are down a little now, but they're still up much higher than it was in 2019. And I think Vance, I think probably that won Vance over, if you will.
Could you see yourself playing a role in an administration under President Trump if he were to win? And if so, what might it be?
Well, look, I had that conversation with President Trump last week, and I told him I'm always willing to serve, whether it's inside the administration, whether it's outside the administration. I can tell you when I heard that he was shot on Saturday, this is a guy that I've known for nearly 30 years, had the honor of working 4 years for him in the White House. And I felt like it was a family member in those moments where I didn't know if he was going to live or going to die. And I told him, look, I'll support you, whether it's on the inside, whether it's on the outside. Most importantly, we need to save our country. And I also told him, I said, let's make sure we have that conversation on November 6th. That's the conversation I want to be having.
All right. Well, we'll have to leave it there, unfortunately, but a good conversation, Mr. Giuliani. Thank you very much for joining us. Andrew Giuliani there, former special assistant to former President Donald Trump and a former candidate for the governorship of New York.